Wow. Okay. So today is a pretty big day in gaming history. I mean, for those of us who remember, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The PlayStation 2,
I was going to say.
it launched in Japan 25 years ago today.
25 years.
Man.
Crazy, huh?
It really is. It doesn't feel like that long ago we were all like drooling over the tech demos and like that sleek black design.
Yeah. I mean, everyone was talking about the emotion engine.
Right.
Like it was straight out of science fiction.
It kind of was.
Yeah.
For the time, at least.
And of course, the PS2 went on to become like, what, the best-selling console ever?
Still is.
Still is, yeah. I think we all know that. But for this deep dive, I think we need to like go a little deeper.
Yeah, totally.
Beyond just the sales figures and stuff.
More than just a number, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It really like it shifted how we thought about like consoles as these whole entertainment things.
Yeah.
And it came out right at the turn of the millennium, so it was like this perfect storm, you know?
Yeah, everyone was wondering what was next, and in a lot of ways, I think the PS2 answered that.
Yeah, it really did.
And that emotion engine, it wasn't just a marketing gimmick either.
Right.
Sony, they teamed up with Toshiba, made this custom processor that on paper was more powerful than a lot of PCs back then.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But the real genius, though, was in the architecture.
Okay.
It wasn't just raw power. They designed it so it could handle graphics, sound, AI, all in this totally revolutionary way.
So it wasn't just about making the graphics better. It was about what those graphics allowed you to do in the game.
Exactly.
Like, could we have even had a game like Grand Theft Auto San Andreas on any other console back then with that huge open world and everything?
Honestly, it's debatable. But that parallel processing the PS2 had, it was key. Suddenly, developers had this tool where they could manage these huge environments and crazy physics, and nobody had done that before, at least not on that scale, and San Andreas pushed that to the limit.
Yeah.
And, well, I mean, it worked, right? Became a total cultural phenomenon.
It really did. It really did.
And San Andreas wasn't the only one.
Right.
The PS2 had this insane lineup of games that basically defined their genres. Metal Gear Solid 2, Shadow of the Colossus, Final Fantasy X. I mean, every one of them, they pushed the limits of what games could be visually, story-wise, everything.
Yeah. And it wasn't just those big, like, cinematic titles.
Oh, no.
Like, remember Katamari Damacy?
Oh, how could I forget Katamari Damacy?
That game was pure joy.
It really was.
That's another thing that sticks out to me about the PS2 era. It felt like there was so much just willingness to try new stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You know, put out these games that were like weird or different.
Unique, yeah.
And totally unique.
I felt like, I don't know, developers had this new playground and Sony was like, go nuts. And that freedom, it led to some of the most creative and memorable games of all time, for sure.
Yeah, totally. And let's not forget the built-in DVD player.
Oh, right.
Like, that was a huge selling point back in 2000.
Absolutely.
Standalone DVD players were still so expensive.
Yeah, it was a luxury.
So having one built into your gaming console, it was a game changer.
I mean, literally a game changer, you could say.
Yeah.
It opened up the PS2 to a whole new audience.
Yeah, for sure.
Families who might not have even thought about getting a gaming console, suddenly it made sense.
Right.
You could play all the latest games Andy watch movies in, like amazing quality.
Yeah.
It became the entertainment center for so many homes.
Yeah.
It was smart. Sony positioned the PS2 as more than just for gaming. It was like part of the living room, you know?
Yeah. Which, looking back, was super forward thinking.
Totally.
They understood that convergence was the future, and the PS2 was like the perfect example of that. Though, of course, no console is perfect.
Oh, no, for sure.
There were definitely some bumps along the way.
What are you thinking?
Well, let's talk about online gaming.
Oh, yeah.
Compared to Xbox Live, which launched with that like unified subscription service, the PS2's online stuff felt, I don't know.
A little clunky.
Yeah, clunky.
Like fragmented. It was a different time, though, to be fair.
True.
Broadband internet wasn't everywhere yet, and Sony, they just didn't seem as into online gaming as Microsoft was.
Right.
But, you know, even with those limitations, the PS2 still managed to build a pretty strong online community.
Yeah.
Especially for games like, remember SOCOM US Navy SEALs?
Oh, yeah.
That was one of the first console games to really capture that intensity and teamwork you get in military shooters.
For sure.
And it actually highlighted, in a way, how Sony's approach, you know, that more decentralized approach, it had its upsides.
Okay.
So Xbox Live, it was more streamlined, for sure. But the PS2, it gave developers more control over how they did their online stuff. So it led to some really unique online experiences that you wouldn't have seen on a more, I guess, locked down platform.
So it was a trade-off,
Yeah.
a curated experience versus like more freedom for developers. It's pretty fascinating how those two approaches, those philosophies, kind of shaped online gaming.
Absolutely. And it's a debate that's still going on today,
Yeah.
But even with the rough start, you got to give the PS2 credit. It was a huge part of paving the way for the massive online worlds we have in games now.
Yeah, no doubt.
I mean, can you imagine gaming today without these huge, persistent online worlds?
No, not really.
It's crazy to think about.
It is.
And speaking of paving the way, we got to talk about the slim PlayStation 2 that came out later.
Oh, yeah, the
Had that
Slim.
before?
It was insane how they fit all that power into such a tiny little box.
Yeah, the PS2 Slimline was a design masterpiece. And it showed how Sony was, adapting to the changing gaming world.
Yeah.
They made the PS2 more accessible, more affordable, and, let's be honest, way more stylish.
Yeah, it definitely had that cool futuristic look.
Totally.
But, I mean, they did have to make some sacrifices to get it that thin.
Right. The biggest one was probably getting rid of the expansion bay for the hard drive.
Yeah, that was a big deal for people who wanted to do online gaming.
Absolutely. The hard drive made downloading and installing games and updates so much smoother.
Right.
So yeah, another trade-off.
Sleeker design, less functionality.
It's interesting how those design choices show you what was important back then.
Yeah, totally.
You can really see the priorities of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, those compromises, they didn't stop the PS2 from being like the king of gaming for years.
No, they didn't. The PS2 stayed relevant for so long.
Way longer than most consoles.
It was still selling like crazy even after the PlayStation 3 came out.
Which is insane when you think about it.
It really is. A PS2, it wasn't just a console. It was like an era.
Yeah.
It was a time when like creativity and innovation in gaming just exploded.
Definitely.
And that shared passion for gaming, it's still with us today.
100%.
And on its 25th anniversary, I think it's worth remembering all the ways it shaped not just the games we play, but how we think about gaming as a whole.
Yeah, well said.
I mean, it changed everything.
It really did.
So I think for the rest of this deep dive, let's really dig into some of the innovations that made the PS2 so groundbreaking.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, so let's start with that emotion engine.
All right.
People, they toss that term around, but it was way more than just marketing hype.
Right.
It was like this fundamental change in how they built console hardware.
Yeah, I remember reading about all that parallel processing stuff and being like, wait, a console can even do that?
It was a huge leap.
It felt like we were suddenly jumping like a whole generation ahead in terms of what games could look and feel like.
Yeah, exactly. Sony basically built this system where different parts of the processor could handle specific tasks all at the same time.
Okay.
So this let them do the crazy calculations you needed for realistic graphics, physics, AI, all that without, sacrificing performance.
And it wasn't just like they slapped a super powerful processor in there and called it a day, right?
No way.
Like, there were a lot of really clever design choices they made around memory management, too, if I remember correctly.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The PS2 used this combo of, high bandwidth RDRAM and embedded DRAM, which was, essential because it allowed for super fast data transfer,
Right.
which you needed for all those detailed environments and smooth gameplay we were talking about.
Yeah, for sure.
It was really cutting edge for the time.
Okay, but even people who weren't really into gaming, they knew the PS2 had a DVD player.
Oh, for sure.
I remember my family got one mainly for that, and then, we kind of discovered the games later.
Yeah.
Do you think Sony knew back then just how much that DVD player would, broaden their market?
It was a brilliant move, for sure, whether they knew the full impact or not. I mean, at the time, DVD players were still pretty expensive.
Oh, yeah.
Like a luxury item. So by putting one in the PS2, Sony basically made it the cheapest way to get your hands on this new tech.
It was like they snuck gaming into all these households that would have never even considered a console before.
Exactly.
And once those families got a taste of, Grand Theft Auto or Tony Hawk,
Oh, yeah.
that was it. They were hooked.
Totally. It was game over.
And it really solidified that idea of the PS2 as, the center of your entertainment system in the living room.
Right. You could play games, watch movies, listen to CDs. I mean, the thing did it all.
Yeah, which is interesting because in some ways, that's kind of come full circle now.
How so?
Well, consoles are, fighting to be that central entertainment device again, right?
Oh, I see what you mean.
With streaming services and all these different apps and stuff.
Yeah.
You could argue that the PS2 kind of set the stage for all that.
Oh, absolutely.
And normalized that idea of a console being more than just for games.
It was a sign of things to come, for sure.
Yeah, it really was. But let's not forget about the games themselves.
Right.
Like when we talk about the PS2's legacy, we can't ignore just how many amazing games it had.
No way. You're absolutely right. The PS2, it had something for everyone. I mean, massive RPGs like Final Fantasy X and Kingdom Hearts. Yeah. To those quirky, unique titles like Katamari Damacy and Okami, I mean, it really embraced variety and that willingness to experiment in a way that I don't think we've seen in many consoles since then.
It really felt like every genre was represented. Each one had at least a few games that were just like absolute classics.
Oh, for sure.
Like Metal Gear Solid 2.
Classic.
Completely redefined what a stealth action game could be.
Totally agree.
Silent Hill 2 took psychological horror to a whole new level.
For sure.
And then you had games like Shadow of the Colossus, which is almost like, I don't know, an interactive art piece more than a traditional game.
You know, it's funny you say that.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about Shadow of the Colossus.
Really?
It was visually stunning, emotionally powerful, and like nothing anyone had played before.
I remember being just like blown away by how massive those colossi were.
Yeah.
It was a game that like stuck with you long after you finished it.
Definitely. And that's another thing that really stands out about the PS2. These games weren't afraid to be different.
Right.
They experimented with story, with gameplay, even with the art style, you know?
And they pushed the boundaries of what the technology could do.
Oh, yeah.
Think about a game like Gran Turismo 4. I mean, the car models were so realistic.
And it's great.
You could practically see your reflection in the paint.
Gran Turismo 4 was a technical marvel, for sure.
Yeah.
It pushed the PS2's hardware as far as it could go, and it showed what developers could do when they really understood the emotion engine. But it wasn't just about realism either.
Right.
You had games like Rez, which took this totally different approach with stylized visuals and electronic music to create this really unique sensory experience.
Rez was a trip. I still remember feeling like I was inside a music video where every shot I fired was like triggering these explosions of color and sound.
It was so innovative, and it just goes to show that the PS2 was a console that embraced that I don't know, that sense of experimentation and creativity.
It wasn't just about those big blockbuster franchises and safe sequels.
No way.
It was about pushing boundaries and trying new things.
Exactly.
And that sense of possibility extended to the online stuff too, even though, like we talked about earlier, the PS2's online infrastructure wasn't quite as polished as Xbox Live.
Yeah, that's true.
It was definitely rough around the edges.
But, you know, Sony's approach, it was more fragmented for sure, but it did lead to some more creativity, you know?
Okay.
It gave developers more freedom to experiment.
We talked about SOCOM, but there are other games like Final Fantasy XII.
Oh, yeah.
Which was like a pioneer in the MMO world.
Final Fantasy XII, groundbreaking game. It brought players together from all over. Let them explore this huge, persistent world, do quests together, even make real friendships online.
It paved the way for those massive MMOs we have now, like World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV.
All those games, they owe a lot to those early pioneers who dared to, you know, dream of these persistent online worlds on consoles.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
It is. And while Sony's approach to online gaming, you know, wasn't perfect, it did have its upsides.
Right.
Giving developers that freedom led to some really unique and memorable online experiences that honestly wouldn't have been possible on a more, I guess, tightly controlled platform.
So it's another example of how the PS2's legacy is, well, it's complicated.
Yeah, it's multifaceted.
It wasn't always about doing things the right way or having the most cutting-edge tech. It was about embracing innovation, trying new things, and sometimes even like a little bit of chaos.
And that's what made it so special, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most interesting and influential innovations, they come from the most unexpected places.
Speaking of unexpected, we've talked a lot about the technology in the games. But I think there's another side to the PS2's legacy that's worth exploring. Its impact on culture beyond just gaming. It wasn't just the games themselves. It was like the whole feeling of the PS2 era.
Oh, yeah.
This sense of discovery, like a whole world of possibilities was opening up.
I know exactly what you mean. And think about the impact on music.
Oh, yeah.
Game soundtracks. they became more than just background noise. They were like full-on albums, blending genres, incorporating orchestral stuff, just pushing boundaries.
Yeah, like the Kingdom Hearts soundtrack.
Oh, yeah.
This epic blend of Disney music and original compositions.
Amazing.
It was like listening to a movie score.
Totally.
And who could forget the Grand Theft Auto Vice City soundtrack?
So good.
That practically defined a generation's taste in 80s music.
It's true, and it went beyond music, too.
Okay.
The PS2, it even influenced fashion and design.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, that sleek black design, it became, like, synonymous with cool, you know? It felt futuristic, cutting edge, and you saw it everywhere.
Huh. Like where?
Like clothes, product designs, everything.
Wow. I never really thought about it that way.
It was everywhere.
And I guess the games themselves started to influence movies and TV shows too, right?
No, absolutely.
Like the way they told stories, the action sequences, even how the stories were structured.
Yeah.
It all started to like bleed over into other media.
For sure. The lines between gaming and other entertainment were getting blurry, and the PS2 was leading the charge.
Yeah, it really brought gaming into the mainstream.
It did. It took gaming to a whole new level of cultural relevance.
But even beyond those more tangible influences, I think the PS2 had this deeper impact on how we thought about technology and entertainment in general.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Like it was this gateway to a whole new world of like interconnectedness. Online gaming was still in its early days, but the PS2 showed us what was possible with shared experiences, with building communities around these virtual worlds.
It really was a glimpse into the future.
Yeah, and it made it normal to think of consoles as more than just gaming devices. They could be entertainment hubs, social spaces, even platforms for creativity.
Exactly. The PS2, it was a sign of things to come.
It really foreshadowed how technology and entertainment would converge.
Like what we see today with streaming, social media, all that stuff competing for our attention on one device.
Yeah, exactly. And 25 years later, we're still feeling those ripples.
100%.
Crazy, huh?
We are. Think about all the developers who were inspired by the PS2, the games they made, the risks they took, the boundaries they pushed.
Yeah.
It all started with that little black box.
And all those unforgettable experiences.
Exactly. I think that's the real legacy of the PlayStation 2.
Okay.
It's not just about the hardware or the sales numbers. It's about the impact it had on our lives, the memories we made, and how it shaped the future of entertainment.
It was more than just a console.
It was a cultural phenomenon that changed how we play, how we connect, how we experience the world around us.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the PlayStation 2.
Sounds good.
But before we go, we want to hear from you.
Oh, yeah.
What's your favorite PS2 memory? Which game defined your experience with that incredible console?
Share your stories, your nostalgia, your love for this iconic piece of gaming history.
Because the PlayStation 2 wasn't just about the games, it was about the people who played them.
And that's a legacy worth celebrating.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.